Hollywood actors live surrounded by luxury, fame and secrets that never reach the public. But what the FBI discovered at a former movie star's mansion went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. What started as a simple investigation ended up leading the agents to a hidden underground tunnel where unexplained horrors were hidden. The mystery, the disturbing clues and the actor's sudden disappearance made this one of the most sinister cases ever recorded. Get ready for a realistic story, full of suspense and frightening revelations. Sit back, put on your headphones and enter this dark mystery. The sun was starting to set Los Angeles, casting a golden glow over the hills of Beverly Hills. Amidst the luxurious mansions of movie stars, there was one property that stood out, not through luxury, but through abandonment. The mansion of Richard Holloway, a name that was once synonymous with success, now seemed like just a ghost of the past. In the 70s and 80s, Holloway starred in dozens of action and thriller films, always playing tough characters. But as the years passed, its popularity collapsed. Scandals, divorces, and public fights made him an increasingly reclusive figure. For the past 15 years, no one knew for sure what was happening behind the gates of his estate. Until, in October 2005, an anonymous tip changed everything. A call to the Los Angeles FBI aroused the curiosity of the agents. The voice on the other end of the line was distorted, as if it were being masked by a voice modulator. "You guys need to investigate Richard Holloway. He is not alone in that house. What he hides under the mansion is worse than any movie he's ever starred in." Before they could trace the call, the line went dead. Initially, the agents didn't pay much attention. The FBI received hundreds of absurd complaints every day. But something about that call made Agent Michael Carter decided to investigate. He began gathering information about Holloway. Reports showed that the actor hadn't left the house in years, and their bank accounts were operated irregularly. The strangest thing was that, even without working for decades, he never seemed to run out of money. But it was a detail that caught even more attention. Old police reports indicated frequent disappearances in the region, some of them of people who had last been seen near Holloway Mansion. This was enough to convince Carter to act. In the morning of October 25, 2005, an FBI team received authorization to enter the property, alleging a financial fraud investigation. The warrant was just a pretext, the real goal was to discover what Holloway was hiding. The approach took place at 6 a.m. A convoy of vehicles arrived at the gates of the mansion. Armed agents, dressed in FBI vests, took up positions. They rang the doorbell. No response. After 3 attempts, they decided to break down the gate. The mansion was silent, with a strong smell of mold and abandonment. The garden was overgrown with weeds, and the windows were covered with thick curtains. As soon as they entered, they noticed that the house seemed frozen in time. Antique furniture, aged movie posters on the walls, award trophies covered in dust. But what was most disturbing was the total absence of signs of life. "FBI. Richard Holloway, if you're here, we just want to talk," shouted one of the agents. Nothing. They advanced through the house, searching room by room. But that was when they arrived at the basement, which the suspicions were confirmed. On the floor, behind a shelf full of old books, a metal trapdoor was locked with a large padlock. The tension increased. One of the agents tried to force the lock, without success. Another took a crowbar and broke the padlock with a strong blow. The trapdoor slowly opened, revealing a narrow, damp staircase, descending to an underground tunnel. The flashlight light revealed aged concrete walls, with marks of moisture running down the cement. The air was heavy, with a nauseating smell which grew stronger as the agents descended. "My God, what is that smell?" muttered one of the agents, covering his mouth with the sleeve of his jacket. Michael Carter, at the head of the group, took a deep breath and pointed his flashlight toward the end of the tunnel. That's when everyone stopped instantly. At the end of the narrow corridor, there was a huge steel door, with scratch marks around the lock. But the worst part wasn't the door. On the floor, scattered throughout the hallway, there were dozens of objects that shouldn't be there. Children's shoes. Torn clothes. Broken toys. And then came the scariest detail. On one of the walls, someone had scratched out shaky, almost illegible words. "Help." Silence took over the group. None of them wanted to be the first to open that door. But it was already too late to retreat. Carter signaled, and 2 agents stepped forward. They turned the handle. The door slowly opened. The flashlight illuminated the interior. And what they saw would leave them scarred forever. The smell was unbearable. As soon as the steel door was opened, the heavy, damp underground air escaped, bringing with it an odor of decay. Lanterns flickered in the dark, illuminating a long, narrow corridor that stretched beyond what the eye could see. The agents advanced cautiously. The concrete floor was stained, as if something had been dragged across it countless times. The walls were lined with metal shelves, where objects were stacked in a disorganized manner: children's clothes, backpacks, watches, yellowed photographs. Each item seemed to tell an interrupted story. As they got deeper into the tunnel, they realized they weren't just under the house. The hallway seemed to extend for tens of meters, dug underground like a concrete maze, far beyond the confines of Richard Holloway's mansion. It was then that they found the first cells. Tight spaces, with rusty bars, lined up as if they were part of a clandestine prison. Some were empty, others contained dirty mattresses and chains attached to the wall. The ceiling was low, and metal hooks hung from it as if they had already supported something. There were scratch marks on the floor, indicating that someone had tried to get out. The agents held tight to their weapons. The atmosphere was oppressive, each step echoed through the hallway as if the tunnel itself was breathing. Further ahead, a new door appeared, this one more reinforced, made of thick metal and without a handle on the inside. There was an electronic locking system, something too sophisticated to be in the basement of an abandoned mansion. Investigators tried to break into it, but without success. Only when they used a hydraulic tool were they able to force entry. What did they see on the other side? It was worse than any of them could imagine. It was in the room, big and dark, lit only by dim lamps hanging from the ceiling. But what dominated the environment? There were stretchers and metal tables, covered by stained sheets. Old medical equipment was scattered around, some still with wires connected to disconnected monitors. The floor was covered in papers, destroyed medical files and files that appeared to have been partially burned. In the corner, there was steel drawers, similar to those in morgues, some half open. When one of the agents approached and pulled one of them, the horror revealed itself completely. The remains of a body, mutilated and already in a state of decomposition. They were there, wrapped in a plastic tarp. The skull was exposed, the withered skin stretched over the bones. It was not possible to identify the victim just by his face. But there wasn't just one. Other drawers contained more human remains, some just bones, others bodies still partially preserved, as if they had been stored there for years. Hanging on the wall, a clipboard contained disturbing notes. Dates, numbers, identification codes. Some of the chips were decades ago, while others were recent. One of the agents looked through the documents thrown on the floor. Among the burned pages, he found something that made his stomach turn. A list of names. And between them, the name of a girl who had disappeared just 6 months earlier. Silence took over the room. None of them could understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Richard Holloway wasn't just a forgotten actor. He was behind of something much bigger, much darker than anyone could imagine. But then, something unexpected happened. A noise echoed through the tunnel. Not a mechanical sound, not an echo of the agent's movement. A noise of footsteps. Boards. Coming from inside the underground labyrinth. Somebody, it was still there. The FBI agents stood still for a moment. The dark tunnel seemed to breathe around them, as the slow, dragging steps echoed through the hall. The sound came from the bottom of the underground labyrinth, from a point that the flashlights could not reach. Agent Michael Carter raised his gun, the others did the same. The rotten smell in the air made everything even more suffocating. Each of their hearts were beating fast. They were not alone there. They slowly advanced through the narrow corridor. The echo of footsteps continued, but now it seemed to be getting further away, as if someone was fleeing into the depths of the tunnel. When they reached a fork in the road, the beam of the flashlights revealed something even more disturbing. One of the corridors ended in an open metal door, with a dim light flickering inside. Inside the room, a rusty chair with leather straps, similar to a containment device, was right in the center. Around, steel drawers, similar to those found in the other room, were piled with more human remains. But it was when they turned into the other corridor that they found something that made them stop in their tracks. Crouched on the floor, with her knees drawn up against her chest, there was a woman. His hair was disheveled, pale skin, her eyes sunken and red from crying. She was dressed in a thin, dirty nightgown, her feet bare on the cold concrete floor. She was shaking, as if she were trapped there for a long time. One of the agents slowly lowered his gun and took a step forward. "My God!" The woman raised her face slowly, as if was afraid of the light. His eyes widened when he saw the armed men, and she began to mumble disjointed words. He will come back. He told me he would come back." The silence in the tunnel was total. It wasn't there by chance. Richard Holloway kept her trapped in that hole. The agents approached to help her get up. Her body was fragile, her wrists marked by bruises, as if she had been tied up for long periods. But before they could ask anything, she whispered something that sent a chill up everyone's spine. "He's still here." The agents looked at each other. Carter shined his flashlight into the darkness of the tunnel ahead. It was then that the noise returned. But this time, it was the sound of metal dragging on the floor. The agents drew their weapons again, their hearts racing. Something moved at the end of the corridor. The darkness made it impossible to see anything, but the sound was getting closer. The metallic drag was irregular, as if someone was walking with difficulty. The woman held her breath, her terrified gaze fixed on the tunnel. Agent Carter held the radio. "We need to evacuate now." The others began to retreat, but the sound intensified. And then, they saw him. One slim and tall silhouette, shoulders hunched, wearing what looked like an old, bloody apron. His face was covered in shadows, but there was something deeply wrong in his posture, in his slow, inhuman movements. And in your right hand, he was dragging a heavy chain across the floor. No one waited to find out more. The agents headed towards the exit, pulling the woman along. The narrow tunnel made escape difficult, but they ran as fast as they could. The metallic sound behind them accelerated. Carter was the last to leave the hull. As he passed through the steel door, he slammed it with all his might and turned the lock. A second later, something hit the other side violently. The echo of the impact reverberated throughout the tunnel. They didn't stay to check what was inside. They quickly climbed the stairs, crossed the basement, and when they finally reached the ground floor, the daylight almost blinded them. Outside, FBI vehicles were already positioned. The woman was taken to a hospital, where she later confirmed everything they had suspected. She wasn't the only prisoner which Holloway had kept over the years. The mansion was completely evacuated and sealed for investigation. More Richard Holloway was never seen again. His name entered the list of the most wanted criminals in the country, but no clue as to his whereabouts was ever found. What was he really doing in that tunnel? How many people passed by there before the FBI found the place? And most disturbingly, who, or what, was still in that underground labyrinth? The case was dropped years later. The mansion was demolished, but reports from nearby residents continued to emerge. Some said that, on silent nights, it was still possible to hear a metallic sound echoing from the earth where the house stood. The drag of a current, coming from somewhere that should never have been discovered.